So I meditated for over 2 hours a day for a year and a half. Here's what happened, and here's all of my insights and blind spots that come along with it. So this is going to be a framework breakdown video. I haven't done this kind of video in a while. And essentially, I'm only going to be doing framework breakdowns on frameworks or systems that I have not only just learned about, but actually got a few hundred hours at least practice-wise. So I'm not just giving, the theoretical principles and why you should do this and why you shouldn't do that. I'm actually giving it from lived experience as well. I will not be doing any framework breakdowns on frameworks that I don't feel like I have a very, very strong competence in. So we are going to start with something that's a little bit different from my other video, which is I've meditated for over 2,300 hours. And here's what happened. That's my whole meditation journey. For this, we're going to be getting into the journey, the meditation style, which I have found the most useful for myself, for clients, and also seen the most exponential results in terms of self-actualization. So the lineage that we are going to be talking about is from the Theravadan school of Buddhism. And for those of you that are wondering what's in the table of contents in this video, I'm going to be going through the lineage, I'm going to be going through what I found was really useful, what I thought was the pitfalls and blind spots, so that you don't have to go through them. And then at the end, we're going to be doing a concluding talk about what you can actually learn from this system and how you right now can benefit the most from this video. So it's not just learning about something theoretically, it's also about putting it into practice. So like I said, it's a Theravadan school of Buddhism. There's two other schools, just to give you context. There's the Vajrayana and the Mahayana. They're kind of one school, but they split off. There's a whole history there, and obviously I'm paraphrasing it, but there's essentially two other schools that you need to know about. Vajrayana and Mahayana. And this is the Tibetan style, this is the Japanese Zen style, this is all of the Buddhism styles that came later, but Theravadan is most predominant in Thai, Burma, and obviously in Sri Lanka and India, where it originally came from. My teacher, just to give you some context, was Venerable Sister Kante Kema. This is her right here, of the Dharmasukha Foundation. And she helped found the Dharmasukha Foundation with her teacher and someone who's even more famous than her, Bhante Vimalaramsi, who's sitting here by the side of her, right? So this is the lineage that I come from. She headed the branch in India, he headed the branch in the US. And was one of before he passed away, was one of the most respected monks in the world, and as a result, so was she. The lineage that these two taught was a type of meditation called TWIM meditation, which stands for, the T stands for tranquil, W stands for wisdom, I stands for insight, M stands for meditation. So what makes this style different? The big emphasis about this style was its focus on the Brahma Viharas, something called the Brahma Viharas, which you can just put into your mind right now as state cultivation, okay? So how to cultivate certain states of loving kindness, states of compassion, states of altruistic joy, and states of equanimity. We'll get into what those mean in good course. And there's a big focus on achieving awakeness and liberation from suffering in this lifetime. And another big emphasis, especially if you know Sister Kema, when she was, still around and kicking, the concept that she specialized in was something called the links of dependent origination. What you can put this into in layman's terms, and which is the reason why I'm including this, because it's most useful for you watching this now, is it's essentially how we create suffering for ourselves. It's a very good framework I have found in explaining how we create suffering for ourselves, and not just understanding it, but then it gives us a path to liberation. And this is just one of the many frameworks I've included in this channel and in this coaching. So the part you need to look at right here in this diagram, right, the most important, is when it goes from feeling tone into craving, okay? This is essentially what is something that's impersonal. Feeling is impersonal. This is something that a lot of Stoicism, or people following Stoicism, Stoic people who even adopt Buddhist practices, all that kind of stuff, especially in the West and also in the East, to be fair, this is the part which holds them back from all of their progress. They think that being enlightened is not feeling anymore, being what I like to refer to as an emotionally constipated robot. I think I originally got that from my mentor, Pierre. Or what I definitely got from Pierre is something called a Zen devil. Zen devil is someone who uses the practice to not feel anymore, okay? Someone who uses it in order to be equanimous. Technically it's equanimous, but instead of being equanimous and being in this whole world, being in all of this feeling, being in all of this amazingness that is consciousness, they actually take a step back and they become dispassionate. And not in the sense that the Buddha actually meant, right? Because the feeling of something is completely impersonal. If you attain the final stages of awakening, the final stages of enlightenment, whatever you want to classify that by, you will still feel exactly the same as you are now. The difference is that it doesn't turn into craving, which is the personal, taking it personally. Therefore, if I have fear in my body, I am afraid. No. You have fear, there is fear in your body, there is the emotion of fear, but you are afraid, like the essence of you, that's not true. So essentially what that means is you feel everything, and in some ways you can feel it more deeply, but there's no storyline attached to it. There's no personal narrative attached to it. And it's the narrative and the storyline, for those of you that are obviously interested in shadow work, this isn't going to come as a surprise to you. That's the thing that holds the power over you. It's not the fear itself. So an example from my journey is whenever I felt fear getting ready for a competition in jiu-jitsu, I thought there was something wrong, but there wasn't anything wrong. That's normal. Fear is just there. It's normal. It's to get you into a heightened state when you're about to compete in a martial art. And it was when I saw with wisdom that this storyline, it was the storyline that was causing me the suffering and not the fear. That's when I was able to do my best in competition. So that's a diagram of the 12 links of dependent origination. And then this is the artistic version of it, basically. You're on the wheel of samsara, which is the wheel of suffering. So enough about all of that. The method, so you guys have some context about what this meditation method actually is and how it can benefit you, is, like I said, it's an emphasis on developing the states known as the Brahma Viharas. So in Pali, what we have here is metta, karuna, mudita, and upekkha. So this is loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity. So here's a little diagram of that. And you start off in metta, loving kindness. And what developing these states, and we'll get into this in the benefits, is really, really cool for, is that it shows you how malleable your subjective world is. How just with the right intentions and the right changes, you actually can have a direct ownership and not be a slave to your mind anymore. Because if you can create metta whenever you want, if you can hold people in compassion even when you're having an argument, and when you can hold yourself in compassion even when you might have done something wrong, whatever that wrongness is, then this makes you extremely, extremely hard to phase, both for yourself and with other people. So in the social realm, this makes you super, super impactful. When you're going after goals, this makes you much, much more steady. This makes you much, much more grounded. It means that when a bad emotion comes up, like boredom, it's not something that you become reactive to. It's actually something that you can just accept and hold that emotion in compassion too, and continue to do whatever you want. So it helps in so many different ways. But the main one, if I had to pick one, was it helps, like I said, with state cultivation. What state cultivation helps with is seeing how you are not a slave to your mind. You are not a slave to the subjective world that you're living in. This is not something that's happening to you, it's something that's happening from you. And when you have this kind of agency over yourself, it means you can do quite literally everything. It helped me with socializing, helped me with dating and relationships, helped me with just going after and creating a business, helped me with not minding what other people think about me while still not being reactive to it, like not creating identity out of it. That's the other thing, if I just go on this tangent for a little bit. The other thing when people say, oh yeah, I don't care what people think about me. If you say that you don't care, what you actually do, you care that other people know that you don't care about their opinion, right? Which still is holding some kind of power over you. The second part of this method, which makes it so incredible, in my opinion, is this thing called the 6 R's, which is realize, release, relax, resmile, return, repeat. This is giving you something which all of the other meditations that I did not give me. They just said, when you get distracted, come back to the object. The problem with that is that it doesn't get rid of the tension associated in your mind if you are really taking your mind and grabbing it and pulling it back. So for all of those meditators out of there, you probably experienced this issue where you might have done a long sit, an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that, and you kind of feel spaced out, but not in a good way. And it's because of all of that tension that's in your mind, because you've been using so much force to pull your mind back that it gets away from the purpose of meditation, or one of the benefits of meditation, which is a relaxed mind, a relaxed ease, a relaxed zest in the practice. So with the 6 R's, particularly what I'm going to highlight here is the relaxed step, is it gives you a little, first of all, it gives you a little system for the monkey mind, let's say, to kind of come back to and just do And the monkey mind loves to like do stuff like that. It's just helpful to have a little thing for it to do. And it's the relax step which allows you to get rid of all of this tension, to get rid of all of the suffering that you have created, even from the practice, to just allow it to relax in the mind. Not with the body, it's just a mind practice. That's something to bear in mind. But this isn't a how to do TWIM video, this is just my framework review of it. But I prefer my teacher's sister Kama's version, which is called the Never Mind game, which is realize, release, relax, re-smile, and then never mind. And the never mind is important because this is really the energy we should be embodying in meditation. Oh, our focus slipped a little bit. Never mind. Oh wow, this meditation isn't really going very well. Never mind. You see, it's always like that. That if we keep in that energy, in that attitude of a playful zest in the practice, if you keep with that, and guys, this isn't just meditation, this is in all areas of life, then it makes your effort much more sustainable, and over a long period of time it just breaks down that you start outworking everyone if that's what one of your goals are. But it also just means that you don't add extra suffering to your life, right? This is where the practice really shines. So like I said, it's more streamlined and it gets to the heart of the practice much, much better, especially when catered to a Western audience, which I know by my demographics, everyone watching this is Western, which this channel, like I said, undoubtedly needs, because I'm a Westerner. So the way I talk to you will appeal to the other Westerners because there's a shared culture there. So we need to make sure that this is embodied. So my relationship with the practice, just to give you some insights about how seriously I took this practice. So I was already meditating for about 2.5 years before this. I was already getting up to 90-minute sits, but that was kind of more of a one-off time, and I was more averaging like 45 minutes to an hour sit. So when I started off with the practice, I was living with Sister Kama alongside my mentor Pierre and my colleague, well not my colleague, but my peer Cameron Borthwick, who's actually on the channel in a podcast that we done together. So I started off with a 1-hour sit, and this progressed to 90-minute sits almost instantaneously, right? So that was a big jump for me. And then it went up to 3 hours in a day total. So there was one day where I would do 3 hours. This was usually Saturday. We would do 3 hours. We start at 2 p.m. end around 5 p.m. And then the other days I would do 90 minutes in the morning, 90 minutes in the evening. And then during the period that we were living together with Sister Kama, this was daily Dharma talks and feedback with her. She's a hard taskmaster, let me just tell you that much. And that was for around 3 to 4 months, and then after that it was more of a dana practice. So dana is the Pali word for a generosity practice, I believe. And getting feedback with her more sporadically, and also getting feedback from my other mentor Pierre, who was trained to give feedback by Sister Kama. And it became more of a dana practice because she was in the hospice in Budapest, and we were going and seeing her 2 or 3 times a week, just to see how she was doing and to kind of keep her company until she eventually passed away. So I was also learning and practicing and mentoring people with hypnotherapy at the same time. The reason I included this is because we have the Eastern way of looking at how suffering is created, and then with a Western spirituality practice, now I was also integrating and learning about how suffering is created more in the relative mind, more in a therapeutic sense. Because this is important, because as we're going to see in the drawbacks or the blind spots, this is going to be one of the blind spots of this practice. So the key takeaways and insights, my personal journey. We create suffering for ourselves. I think I've already said that. I think it's kind of self-explanatory about why I think that is the case. But we can also have the creation of pleasant states, the Brahma Viharas, to abide in. In some ways we have control over. Now control is kind of a loaded word. We can set up causes and conditions by practicing and by embodying the practice to make it so it just becomes a default. But control, full free will, the jury's out of that, at least on my end. You are welcome to disagree with that. So it gives a practical way of looking at karma that coincides with biochemistry, neuroscience, and therapy. So like I said, in real terms, it lines up with psychology and science. We can atrophy certain parts of ourselves, certain narratives, maybe even certain neural pathways, if we want to look at that from a biochemistry standpoint. I believe biochemistry is the correct term, but please correct me if I'm wrong. And we can set up the causes and conditions through atrophying certain areas of us, we can say, to put it loosely, and by strengthening other areas, that it just makes it easier for us to go into the other parts. So, a very clear example, if every single time a fear comes up when we are going to do something that we want to do, so from my example, it would have been competing. If every single time of that I buy into it, I make it personal, I say I am afraid, I create all these storylines, I think I'm being a pussy or a bitch or whatever like that for being afraid, then that neural pathway, that part of myself, that area of my mind is going to get stronger and stronger and stronger until the causes and conditions have been set up so that I just automatically default to that in a competition. That's what we would describe as a downward spiral, right? But we can also have it the other way, where every single time that fear comes up, I do not give it attention. I do not give it nutriment. I 6R it. I come back to metta. I come back to compassion. Maybe even it might be helpful for me to say some mantras in my head. I didn't find that very helpful, but some people do. The main goal of that is just to not give it any extra nutriment. And if you're not giving it any extra nourishment, and you're giving nourishment to this other part, to this other place, over time the causes and conditions have been set for that to become the default. That's what I mean. So it gives a very actionable view of karma. Karma can be a big scary word, right? I know, because it can be like maybe we're getting too mystical, maybe we're not getting practical enough. I personally really like it, but I know some of my audience might get a little bit apprehensive about it. You can just think of karma as action and reaction. If we put in the right actions over a period of time, suddenly going to the gym is just a habit. And it's harder to not go to the gym than to go to the gym. That can be for everything, including our subjective nature. Having control over our subjective nature. So clinging, craving, and aversion, the three musketeers. So this was a massive breakthrough that this practice helped me with, that the other practice wasn't so explicit with. In TWIM, with the Dharma talks and with the education, they really make sure that you get this. So these are the three ways that we make something personal, that we create suffering for ourselves. Clinging, I have this thing and I don't want to let go of it. I have this identity and I don't want to let go of this. This narrative is just me. Come on, Aaron, this is just me. Can't you just fix this? Right? That's clinging. Craving. There's this thing out there, and I don't just have a desire, but this craving means something about me. If I make this money, then it means something about me, right? And I really want that, and I have all that tension. That's another way we create suffering for ourselves, craving. And then there's aversion, which is, I don't want that thing, please stay away, push it away. And it's ironic because in that push, we're giving it the force and the energy and the nourishment for it to use that force to come straight back into us. And if you do this practice properly and you're sitting for a long time, it's important to sit for a long time because that's when suffering comes up, or that's when painful emotions like fear or boredom or whatever will come up. It's important to sit for that long because then you can see how you're just creating that suffering for yourself. This next point is also extremely important, and it's extremely important to phrase it properly, which is there's less of an attachment to the self of Aaron. However, as we'll get onto later, there's problems with this. And if you don't have the right training, which we didn't really at the beginning, you'll fall into a pathway which is very, very hard to get out of, and which a lot of people in this industry, unfortunately, seem to fall into. But the benefits of it, less of attachment to self, makes change much easier. So we no longer remember that example I just used where it was, but this is just part of who I am, can't we just work around it? I don't want to change this. So an example that I always give from my own journey, which maybe will probably relate to a lot of men listening to this, is this idea of being like a good-looking loser, or an idea of being someone who is really talented but just can't get success. That's something which I didn't really relate to too much, but it was definitely still a little bit there. So the problems with this is if we have an extreme attachment to our sense of identity, our chronology, our personology. I think I just made that word up, but I like that word, personology. If we get attached to that, then it means that letting go of that narrative, realizing that sense of self is actually built on an introjection, so a bad belief, we can essentially shorthand that for. It means that becomes much harder to accept, and when that is harder for us to accept, then it means that change is going to become much, much harder. Whereas if we see the impersonal nature of Aaron, of whoever's watching this, if we see that ultimately it is transient, it is anicca. Anicca is the Pali word for impermanent, and it is changing all of the time. And the reason I had this personality is really due to causes and conditions in my life, which I had no control over. Then changing a part of me is not seen as a big deal because it doesn't have much to do with me anyway. Like I said, there are problems with this, which we will get into. And the last point, which I highlighted because it's important, is equanimity in life. This is the hack that everyone is looking for, especially people who get into self-actualization or even personal development, especially people who are really interested in stoicism. This is what people are actually looking for: equanimity, the ability to be grounded, at peace, a rock of stability in a sea of stress. This is what makes you magnetic to people, it's what makes people gravitate towards you, and it's what manifestation actually is. And equanimity is being all of these things even when you don't feel grounded. Even when you don't feel very stable, when you don't feel at peace. Are you okay with not being okay? If you are, then you can never not be okay. This is what people mean by being stoic, by being grounded, by being attractive even, by having inner peace. This is the people that the Zen devils, which I talked about before, or the people who are really emotionally constipated, this is what they're actually looking for. But they're doing it by trying to suppress emotions, by trying to suppress thoughts. We're not trying to do any of that. We accept that thoughts and feelings are here, and they're here to stay, and that's all good. We are not going to be reactive to them. And here's the funny part, if we are reactive to them, that's okay too. We're not going to be reactive to that. That is true equanimity. And this is something which the practice has in spades, with the limitations which we're about to get into. So unfortunately, and this was a big grief process that I had to go through, and I don't want to speak to my friends or my mentor, but I believe they had to go through as well, but they can speak for themselves, is unfortunately TWIM, Tranquil Wisdom Insight Meditation, Dharma Sukha, at least the way it's being taught in Theravada Buddhism, is not a holistic picture of consciousness, is not a holistic painting of this work that we're doing of self-actualization or self-transcendence. It is kind of self-transcendence, but it's doing it by not integrating all of the stages before. It's just going straight to the transcendence part. So it's only really relevant to the waking up aspect, like I said, almost to a fault. If not careful, and we were careful, you risk disassociating with the relative self, and I can only speak from my experience, but I felt that was happening still, even though I was being careful. We pretty much did all of this, and despite being also mentored in integral theory and ego development theory, and we were just coming into stages and all that kind of stuff, although we hadn't actually got into Stages International or Kim Barter's model of consciousness, learn about spiral dynamic, we learned about all of this. This is how slippery the slope is, that despite all of that context, we were still falling into that trap. So it can make you an emotionally constipated robot if not integrated properly with social practice, showing up and cleaning up. But TWIM does this much better than other practice because the Brahma Viharas are inherently very warm, they're inherently very feeling based. Unless if you just chill out in equanimity the whole time. Although Upekkha is a very soft feeling, that the actual state cultivation of Upekkha, if you stay there too long, it can, like, again, I'm just speaking for myself, it did feel like I was becoming a little bit disassociative with the world, especially when you go for the longer sits, like 1.5 to 3 hours. Due to a lack of structure that even sees systems thinking, that even can see the flex flow, or ideally you want your spiritual teacher to be at least what you would call in spiral dynamics turquoise stage, or meta-aware in stages. So yellow stage is post-conventional, but ideally you want it to be a little bit further up than that. It means that you have to integrate TWIM rather than TWIM being the system which you can just place everything in. So if you don't have a mentor that can see this, you're going to fall into the blind spots of a very heavy waking up practice, even though it has all of that feeling, that lovely feeling-based meditation. You are just going to fall into the same blind spots of everyone who just does waking up, because all of your shadow work and all of your growing up and all of your showing up is going to be filtered through a monastic tradition, and monastic traditions have a lot of blind spots when it comes to integrating into the real world. So this can lead, like I said, to a bad trajectory or growing into a wall of which there's no real way out besides tracking back and doing all of that work to come back and seeing what the next route is. And clearly I really wanted to make this very clear. It does not heal shadows, insecurities, or disruptive parts, okay? This is not a shadow work practice. It can make you feel good, it can make you feel better about yourself, which is obviously good things, but it does not heal shadows. It does not heal insecurities, it does not heal blind spots, it does not make our shadow more integrated. So what actionable lessons can you learn from this on your own journey? It's great to start out with this meditation practice in the big picture, liberation from suffering. So this kind of strict practice, despite all of its problems, is actually what I think the self-actualization community is missing the most. People love to learn about the development stuff. They love to go out and achieve stuff in real life and integrate like an integral life practice. And in some ways they like to do shadow work. It's just that a lot of the material out there is not very good. But because this is boring and inherently very unstimulating, generally speaking, people avoid this because it's one of the free matrices that I got from my mentor Pierre around the path of most resistance. One of the three matrices in the path of most resistance is whatever's the most boring. There's whatever's the most difficult or complex, like complicated to learn, and there's whatever's the most intimidating. This is by far the most boring, especially in the beginning. It's kind of like an acquired taste to like that kind of thing. And that taste, at least for me and all of the people I know, takes a long time to acquire as well. Like I alluded to, the second biggest blind spot, which will yield the most progress for people watching this, is doing real shadow work. I'm not saying that you haven't taken this seriously. It's just that it took me over half a decade to find a good system, and that was my job to do that. It's going to take people much, much longer to find it. It's hard to find a fully integrated shadow work product which knows the blind spots of just going into shadow work and also integrating the lessons of growing up and cleaning up and waking up. And something that doesn't just heal surface level symptoms, but heals the root causes. Well, luckily, I have a solution for that. The most practical guide to shadow work on the internet, the step-by-step guide on how to actually create meaningful and permanent change within yourself, your relationships, and your life as a whole. So this is a product which I was originally going to charge money for, but is now free for everyone watching my YouTube channel. It's in the link below. It's also in the comment below. I really, really recommend that you check that out because it has integrated everything that I have learned over this half a decade long journey of also being really, really fortunate with mentors. So it has the TWIM practice integrated, has Kim Barter's shadow work, it has Scott Jansen's advanced conversational hypnotherapy, has traditional hypnotherapy, NLP integrated, has all of this so you can actually get to the root cause of what is causing you to hold yourself back, whether that's an unintegrated part, a projection, projecting power out into the world, or an introjection, believing that you're not good enough for whatever that is. We can actually get to the root cause by yourself and heal it so that you create transformational change and not just 1%, 1%, 1% change, which doesn't really feel like it's doing a whole lot. And in that program, you have 3 hours of content, and then you have a 4-week step-by-step game plan to take you from 0 to hero. So even if you know nothing or you don't really know how to get started, I have that problem solved for you. So to conclude, what can you take from this video and apply it to your own practice right now, and what you can take from the TWIM practice? What are the areas to zone in on? Investigating the 12 links of dependent origination. That's the first homework. Second one is investigating the 3 characteristics, how we create them, how we experience them, and how we can actually liberate ourselves from them. Like I said, craving, clinging, and aversion. Where's dukkha? That's the concept of dukkha. So that's one of the 3 characteristics. The other 2 characteristics of the 3 characteristics are anicca and anatta, which is impermanence and no self. Then there's cultivating the Brahma Viharas. This will be a really big thing. All of them will be a really big thing, but this will be the easiest to get started for most people. And start out with metta. That's how you should start out. That's the first Brahma Vihara. This right here will change the way that you view your subjective world. It gives more empowerment, and if there's more empowerment, it means that you can actually make the change that you're wanting. And then there's the 4 noble truths. There is suffering, there is a cause of suffering, there is a truth to the end of suffering, and the truth to the end of suffering is the Eightfold Path. Essentially why I put that in, it's not because I'm a hardcore Buddhist, I'm not at all. It's just to know that if there is something which you are not happy with in your life right now, there is an end to that. The cessation to the end of suffering is realizing how we are creating it and liberating ourselves from that, self-liberating our problems. And then if you do all of this, if you hone in and you do the practice properly on these characteristics whilst doing your shadow work homework, right, which I'm giving you for free right here to get started on. I said it's going to be a paid program, but this is for free now. And if you're sitting and if you're integrating all of the stuff that this channel is teaching you, and maybe whatever other teachers you also trust, then you will create an internal reality that will far exceed anybody you know, most probably in your life, and anybody that you will go on to know in your life. Enjoy.